Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting Monday, May 24th, 2021. I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Zoning Board to be open. Adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on December 10th, 2020, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Tri-Town News. Second, on December 29th, 2020, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Excuse me one second.
Yes.
Third, on December 29th, 2020, said notice was posted in the office of the Zoning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues of what the board may legally consider in reaching their decision, and the decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. For any members of the public wishing to ask questions or comment on an application, you will need to use the raise your hand feature when the chairman opens the hearing up for members of the public. Once you are brought into the hearing, you will need to have both audio and video. You will be sworn in and required to give your name and address. If you're calling in on the phone, you press *9, and then to unmute yourself, it's *6. Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh-oh.
Matthew.
You're frozen, Wendell.
Yeah, Wendell's been bleeping since he's been on. Oh, there he is.
Okay.
We get a roll call, please.
Yes. Mr. Cantor?
Here.
Mr. Hughes?
Here.
Mr. Mertens?
Here.
Mr. Moretti's been excused. Mr. Orozco's been excused. Mr. Saya?
Here.
Mr. Stanton has been excused. Mr. Gonzalez?
Here.
And Chairman Nansen.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Tropoli, you mind swearing in the professionals, please?
Okay, all professionals, please raise your right hand. You swear the testimony you'll give this evening be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Very good. Tonight we have Mr. Aguiar, we have Ms. Spiro, Mr. Cunliffe, Ms. Beam, all sworn. I think that's everyone for the meeting. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Aguilar, I just wanted to tell you, your computer right there is video too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh. Okay. Approval of minutes, regular meeting, March 8th, 2021. Eligible voters, Cantor, Hughes, Mertz, Moretti, Saya, Stanton, Nansen. Do I have a motion?
The chairman.
Yes, sir.
I make a motion to move it.
Motion, Mr. Saya,
Second.
second, Mr. Hughes. We have a roll call, please.
Mr. Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Mertens?
Yes.
Mr. Saya?
Yes.
And Chairman Nansen.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, regular meeting, March 22nd, 2021. Eligible voters, Cantor, Hughes, Mertens, Orozco, Saya, Stanton, Gonzalez, Nansen. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
make a motion to move it.
Motion by Mr. Saya,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Mertens. Was that Mertens?
Yes.
Okay. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Mertens?
Yes.
Mr. Saya?
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes.
And Chairman Nansen.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, regular meeting, April 12th, 2021. Eligible voters, Hughes, Mertens, Moretti, Saya, Nansen. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
make a motion to move it.
Motion by Saya. Do I have a second?
Second,
Second by Mr. Hughes. We have a roll call, please.
Mr. Hughes,
yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
Chairman Nansen.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Regular meeting, April 26, 2021. Eligible voters, Canton, Mertens, Orozco, Saya, Nansen. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
make a motion to move it.
Motion by Mr. Saya, second.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Mertens. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any vouchers?
I have no vouchers this evening.
Correspondence?
I have no correspondence this evening.
Wow. Resolutions, case number BA 2121. Rashid Gimpeli Lane Inc. Granting conditional use variance and minor site plan with bulk variances. Eligible voters, Cantor, Hughes, Mertz, Orozco, Saya, Stanton, Nansen. Do I have a motion?
Well, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
if I may, I just want the board to remember that there was a specific condition which we were looking for as a board, Sherry's direction. Not to put Sherry on the spot, but the application had been heard quite some time ago.
Yes, sir.
Perhaps the board might feel more comfortable if Sherry could possibly give a brief synopsis as to where we're at now. When I last spoke with her, I understand that while there has been some fairly substantial work, there still is no plan, at least that I have seen. So I decided that we should put it on tonight to see whether or not the board is comfortable, and if Sherry herself would be comfortable as a condition of approval, that the landscaping plan as set forth on the record must be satisfactory to Sherry. And again, I put it on the record just so we didn't lose this resolution, because it's approximately 2 months old now, Mr. Chair. So before we did a motion, perhaps Sherry, can you possibly give a brief summary as to where we're at?
Sure. I did meet the applicant and his engineer out on site a few weeks back. And they did remove all those stumps that, were throughout the yard, and it was nicely cleared. They still had that large silver maple in the center of the site, which I did recommend for them to take out. It wasn't a good tree. It wasn't in good condition. So they were going to take that tree out. And so I went over with their engineer, what we wanted to plant and where. They were supposed to send me a plan maybe last week or so. I just got the plan today. So I took just a quick look at it. I mean, it's not, much to look at, but it's they have like 14 green giants. Most of them are along East 4th Street. They have 3 along the side. And then there's a couple shade trees and about 6 ornamental trees in the front. So I was going to make some minor corrections to the plan. I want him to shift some trees over a little bit, and the shrubs he put on, they just need to be altered a little bit. But as far as the quantities, it is what I was asking. So, I don't have a problem if they want to approve it, and, I can still work with the engineer and just to make some small changes to the plans. But as far as the quantity, I think it's fine.
Let me ask you just one question, Sherry. Are they working with you?
Yes, they are. So, it was a little slower, but he did do what I asked. I just need some things shifted around a little bit. But yes, they did work with me on that.
So if we approve this, do you think we'll have a problem enforcing?
No, because even if this plan goes in as he has it right now, it's not like there's a problem with the plan. He just has some evergreens shifted over where there's ornamentals. I just want the evergreens really all along East 4th rather than the ornamentals up front, just to provide better coverage. But I'm not really going to change the quantity. It's just more shifting trees. So I don't see that that's going to be an issue at all with them.
And Mr. Chair, just to backstop that a bit, one of the conditions of approval in the resolution would be a landscaping plan subject to the CTE's approval. So I believe the board is covered, but again, it'll be your call with regard to passing it this evening.
All right, I'm gonna leave that up to the board, you know.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if I may comment, I passed by the site immediately after we voted that night or the next day, and there were many dozens of stumps still on the property. And subsequently, I guess about 2 or 3 weeks later, I passed by the site again. It's on my way to Wawa. And the stumps are all gone. The ground was cleared nicely. You know, it's not a mess anymore. So as long as they put in the new trees now, the property does look to be in good shape. So I'm comfortable voting on it based on my visual inspection.
It's totally up to the board, you know. I'm not
Sherry,
gonna.
excuse me, Sherry, were we putting anything around the building or leaving it open?
Yeah, that wasn't part of this. We were just working on, you know, providing some plant materials on East 4th. I don't think they have anything proposed, you know, for the rest of the site. It was just putting in the yurt.
Okay. I mean, I'm okay, as you know, if everybody else is, I'm fine.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the board?
I make a motion that we pass the conditional use variance and minor site plan.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all right, I've got a motion by Mr. Cantor, seconded by Mr. Hughes. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
Yes,
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized.
thank you very much. Okay, before we move on to cases to be heard, I just want to make a little statement here. Come 10 o'clock, we're shutting the meeting down at 10 o'clock. Some of us have got to get up real early in the morning and drive a long way. And I just, you know, it's going to be a couple hours sleep to go a long ways. So I'm just letting everybody know ahead of time at 10 o'clock, I want to shut the meeting down at that time.
Yeah.
Okay.
No argument here, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. Good to go.
Okay, application before the board. Case number BA 1823, Home Sweet Home Daycare Center, Inc. Use variance, bulk variance, and minor site plan. Application of Home Sweet Home Daycare Center, Inc. is applicant. Camp Royal LLC is owner. Seeking a use variance, bulk variance, minor site plan approval to construct a 146 square foot addition to the principal structure for additional bathroom facility. A 520 square foot addition to the principal structure for additional classrooms. A solar roof canopy at the rear of the principal structure, 20 by 40 pole barn in the rear left cornering of the property. A 20 by 20 concrete pad, 10 by 17 refuge enclosure, and 4 new parking stalls on the west side of the property, located just to the north of the existing parking stall on premises known as Block 154, Lot 13, 321 West Orange Road. This application was partially heard March 8th, and it was carried to March 20 to May 24th with no further notice. Expiration date, June 30th, 2021. Welcome.
We can't hear you, Mr. Toto.
Mr. Chair, as Mr. Toto's logging in, I'd like, if he can hear us, I just want Mr. Toto to be aware. I believe, and again, Eileen, just double check me on this. We have 5 voters unless someone else is, Mr. Gonzalez certified?
No, not that I know of. Did you, Mr. Gonzalez?
Did I what?
Did you watch the video for this case?
No, I have not. I apologize.
So there's 5 voting members.
Right. I just want Mr. Toto to know that we have 5 members. And of course, Walt, you know, we need 5 members. I'm not suggesting that you should carry, but I simply want to bring that to your attention. We're only going to have 5 tonight. You're still muted, Walt, somehow. Can't hear you. Try it again. I think you were there.
No.
Oh,
No.
Your microphone.
You might have to re-log in, right? Didn't we have that issue a few times?
yeah.
Is that him?
Sounds
Wow.
like Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Yeah, he's gonna have to jump out and jump in. Like in the old days, we need some intermittent videos, like when you have technical problems.
No, just. Dun, 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 dun. Have the music.
Yeah. There he is. Let's see.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
And
Thank God. Okay.
before you go any further, Mr. Toto, who do you need brought into the meeting?
I'll need Maria Camporial and Allison Coffin and Rob Siv.
Perfect. Thank you.
So first off, Mr. Chairman, thank you for that concise summation, and good evening to you and members of the board professionals, and to you, Eileen. Ron, I did, yes, the professionals and I have been feverishly texting back and forth about the fact that we only have 5 members tonight. And of course, we need 5 yes votes. 1 no vote would be a denial of the application. Having said that, we would like to move forward. We have made some changes to the plans. We met with the professionals on site. We're certainly prepared to follow through with their recommendations, all of their recommendations, of course, subject to the board's approval and any other further recommendations. So having said all that, we'd like to move forward, gauge the board's reaction, and perhaps halt
Reserve-
the application if need be, but go ahead.
Reserve on the vote until the entire application is in.
If we could do so, yeah, that'd be my pleasure.
Mr. Chairman, I have no objection to that.
Mr. Toto stating that, I believe all of your witnesses have been previously sworn.
They have, Mr. Chairman, and unless the board has further questions of them, my only witness tonight would be Rob Siv, our project engineer, to talk about some of the changes. We have a few more exhibits. Eileen was kind enough to post those on the site and mark those exhibits. I think we have 4 new exhibits. Rob, why don't we, and you're still sworn in, as the chairman said, why don't you walk us through the changes and the meeting we had with the staff on site, and go from there, if you would.
I'll do that, but real quick before I do that, I just want to apologize, Sherry, for Gary for getting you that plan today. He was one of the people, Chairman, that got the second COVID shot. He's been out of the office for almost 2 weeks now. He just got back.
Yep.
So that's why it took a little while to get you that plan, so I apologize. But in any event, as it relates to this application, as Mr. Toto indicated, based on the concerns from the board and the public at the March 8th meeting and a subsequent site meeting we had with the board professionals, the plan has been upgraded to relocate the dumpsters to the southwest corner of the existing paved parking area and proposing a masonry enclosure.
Can we bring that drawing up, please?
What's that?
I can bring it up, the drawing.
Yeah, I have I was trying to share my screen here as I was talking.
I'll take care of it.
I have a colored rendering.
Give me 1 second. Is that the colorized aerial exhibit, Rob?
Yes.
There you go.
All right, perfect. That's it. If you can zoom in, yeah, a little bit. That's good. As I indicated, we are relocating the proposed trash enclosure in the southwesterly corner of the existing paved parking area, right around where the hand is circling.
Okay.
In addition, we are utilizing grass pavers for the 2 proposed parking areas. The first proposed parking area is 4 parking stalls along the westerly property line. And the second parking area is 4 proposed parking stalls in front of the school.
Okay.
The net result after losing the 3 parking stalls for the trash enclosure relocation and then the additional 8 stalls will provide a total of 11 parking stalls on the site, where 10 is required, so we meet the parking standards. As previously discussed at the March 8th meeting, we are proposing dry wells and recharge systems, which will collect and infiltrate the 100-year storm event for the net increase in impervious coverage. I know there was concern with drainage, so any new impervious coverage, we're proposing to mitigate it through dry wells for the entire 100-year storm event from those areas. And then the plan has also been upgraded to include a backup generator in the southwesterly portion of the rear of the building. So those are the plan changes that we've made to accommodate and address some of the board's concerns as well as the neighboring properties. I think one of the other concerns or questions was landscaping and screening. As you can see from the aerial, there are a large stand of mature trees around the perimeter of the site. I had also submitted some pictures of the site from various different locations on the property. If I can share those with the board, I can do that as well.
I'll get that one second.
Real quick, can you, I was going to ask you to
Sorry.
point where the generator location was.
Sure. You want me to try to share my?
I think there's a little red square in the back there.
Here?
Right there, exactly. That's it. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
And that was a series of 3 photos you want?
Correct. Yes, please.
Rob, can you just clarify for the board with that generator, the setback distance from the face of the dwelling to the furthest face of the generator, just so the board knows our ordinance requires a 5-foot distance. It's not something atypical for the board to grant something, a foot or 2 greater than that, which, is generally de minimis. I just want to get it on the record if the board doesn't take issue with it, what that distance is.
Sure. We put the concrete pad for the generator roughly 2 feet off the building. So the farthest most face of the generator would be about 7 feet from the building facade or wall.
Okay.
The first picture up is standing in the westerly driveway looking east across the front of the building. You can see the existing vegetation on the easterly property line and the front of the building where the buses stage their locations. So this is looking at the front yard, looking from the entrance driveway, looking east. The next shot is from the same westerly driveway, standing at where the dumpster locations are now proposed, looking from the southwesterly building corner east into the backyard. So this is the existing play structure. You can see the canopy with concrete patio to the left, and then the small fences around the in-ground swimming pool. This is the backyard with the existing vegetation, again, along that easterly property line. I think there's one more photo in this. Yes, PDF. This is looking from that same location, the westerly driveway location, looking directly south at the rear existing mature trees along the southerly property line. So you can see based on these 3 pictures that there is a very good mature screening around this property that provides screening and shielding from neighboring properties from this site.
Rob, I know you have 2 recharge areas proposed. The one to the rear, just for clarification, is that out of the buffers, the residential buffer, farmland buffer? Is that totally out of those buffers? We don't require any relief from the board for those, correct?
That's correct. The proposed system along near the southerly property line is outside of all buffers, yes.
Okay. And I know this may not have been, I know it was not your doing. There was a prior engineering firm engaged to provide some assistance with septic and the disposal field in particular. Right now, the plan shows an encroachment of the proposed disposal field into the right-of-way. We're going to take that out of the right-of-way, of course, correct?
Yeah, it's the proposed septic disposal field shown within roadway widening easement. So it's not in the right of way, but it's in an easement that's on the property.
Fair enough. Yeah.
It's about 2 feet into that easement. The system has not been constructed yet. It was just recently approved. So it can be shifted those 2 to 3 feet outside of that easement area so that it clears the roadway dedication area, roadway easement area.
Okay, Robin, that's the balance of the changes then, correct?
Correct. There is one recharge system that on the plan that I submitted to the board is within the farmland buffer to the east of the school. I placed it there thinking that'd be the best place to catch runoff prior to discharging to the adjoining property line. If it's the board's discretion or pleasure, we can move that outside of that buffer as well.
And Rob, I know Sherry might have some comments on this as to maybe some gaps in the existing landscaping or the existing woodland areas. Depending upon what she says, of course, you think if there are gaps to fill, we could accomplish that through a landscaping plan, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Dakota,
Yes.
let's address that one that's in the recharge that's in the farmland. Is it going to be that difficult to move it out of that?
No, it will not.
Okay, let's move it out of it. That way you don't have to have any relief for that.
Not a problem. It will do that.
Okay.
And Rob, you'll do that, of course, with the chairman's recommendation and the board's recommendation with Mr. Cunliffe on site to determine exactly where it's best suited, depending upon the soils, et cetera.
Correct.
Right? But outside the buffers.
Correct.
Okay.
You have a problem with that, Charlie?
No, Mr. Chair, I just want to share my screen and share Mr. Siv's most recent site plan, just so it's clear for the board what's being proposed. Can everyone see my screen with the plan?
Yeah.
So this is Mr. Siv's revised plan dated May 21st, 2021, which was this past Friday. So along the northerly property line, there's a septic system that's proposed. As Mr. Siv said, they're going to relocate this so it's outside of this roadway widening easement that's approximately 2 feet. In the east side of the existing structure where they're doing the building addition, this is the area of the recharge system that he was just discussing. He indicated that this could be relocated outside of the buffer. It can't go in this area here, Rob. 41 feet here, 50 feet is probably around here. So it's going to have to go somewhere else on the property, either to the west of the structure or to the south side of the structure. What I will say is if the addition can't be piped into it, it's got to be some of the roof leaders for the remainder of the building, just equivalent for the new impervious coverage. And just to make sure it's clear for the board, it's the building addition, it's the canopy expansion that's not over existing impervious. This play structure, like we discussed, Rob, you don't have a stone base as far as I was provided with details. So that's, from my perspective, is going to be considered impervious. The pole barn in the back with the concrete pad, you're going to provide a separate recharge system for that. The parking stalls, you said it's going to be grass paver parking. As far as for the coverage, that can be considered pervious, but as far as for sizing storage volume of stone underneath that, that's got to be like a curve number 98, and then the stone's got to be equivalent, storage for the 100-year storm for those two areas. And then the only condition I would like to specifically state for those, Mr. Chair, is those shall not be permitted to be paved without prior site plan approval by the board. So if down the road a new owner or something like that wants to pave those, they got to come back for site plan approval for that. As far as the refuse enclosure, the note just says refuse enclosure. So Rob, you'll need to provide a construction detail and just clarify that construction call out for the board. As far as the generator, as far as exercising it and noise and impact to neighbors, it's only going to be operating for emergency purposes, loss of power, things like that. It's going to only exercise in accordance with the ordinance on generators. Rob, is that accurate?
That is correct.
And then would you say the existing buffering along the easterly property line and the southerly property line is sufficient to mitigate any noise impacts when it is running during emergency purposes, which is, on a limited basis? Correct.
And it's the decibels for that generator is less than normal conversation decibels.
Yeah, I think it's at 27 what is it, 27 feet. It's less than 63 decibels or whatever is in accordance with the ordinance. And you'll provide specs that show that.
Correct.
All right. That is all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
I have a question for Charlie.
yes, sir.
Charlie, Mr. Siv has mentioned that, the recharge / catch basin is for the additions that are proposed on the plan. But when we heard testimony, we heard from our neighbors, the farmers, they said that there was a pre-existing condition of stormwater runoff, etc. Does this plan remediate the previous as well as the additional that is being proposed?
So what I will say, Mr. Say, and I'll let the applicant provide testimony to that, is my review of existing aerials of the site going back to 2002 and what exists right now, whatever is impervious appears to have existed at least since 2002 and per prior site plan approvals. If that predates the 2004 stormwater management rules, and that was all installed and approved with prior site plan approvals, they're not beholden to mitigate stormwater runoff from things that were previously approved by prior site plan that's legally existing. Now, as far as anything new that's impervious as proposed with this application, it's well within the purview of this board to require them to, retain and detain that stormwater runoff, which they are proposing to do. And I will say, it's not a major development, so it's under a quarter acre of new impervious. It's not an acre of disturbance. So it doesn't necessarily trigger for compliance with the stormwater management regulations of a major development. This is something that's required by the board as part of a use variance, showing that there's no negative impact to adjacent properties. So I'll let Mr. Sid talk about, what's existed on the site per prior site plan approvals, the data construction, and, I don't know if Mr. Sid has any aerials to depict the site, in 2000, early 2000s versus what's there today, represent to the board.
I do have an old aerial that I can try to dig up out of my files while the application's going on. I would concur with generally what Charlie said. Like I said, I'll look for that aerial, but the site improvements have been there for a number of years. I'm going to say prior to at least 2005, 2003-ish as an earliest date.
So what I will say, Mr. Say, is as part of follow-up to the prior meeting, I did look at, there was prior preliminary and final major site plans for this property under a separate owner and applicant where they were doing more extensive building additions. I don't know if it was doubling the size of the building. In that instance, they were required to recharge the entire 100-year storm volume for the added impervious coverage. So what they are proposing now is very consistent with what was required of the prior applicant. And, should the board rule favorably, obviously this all has to be fully engineered and designed. If it's something that is not, acceptable to me from a stormwater management perspective, I'm going to kick them back to the board and they could potentially have to, amend their approval or seek amendment of the approval.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
We're talking about a valid farm that's the next door neighbor.
Correct.
And the valid farm member talked about the runoff for many, many years.
Correct.
So, I won't say that, Charlie has not answered the question. I need a little more clarity though. So Mr. Siv, if you can tell me, what we're doing here in a totality of the present site and its stormwater management runoff, although it may not be required, I'd like for the audience who's listening, and especially the next door farmers, to understand what it is that you're putting on the record. Over.
Sure. What we've done is we are willing to and proposing to mitigate and infiltrate the 100-year storm for all new impervious area. Normally for this size application, we wouldn't have to do that. We would have smaller storm events, the 2 or the 10 or 25-year storm event. So we are going to size the system to have a volume that's larger than what is typically required for this project. So for those smaller storm events, like the 2, the 10, and the 25-year, there will be a reduction because the system will be able to take in some of that water. So we are going above and beyond what's required for this application by enlarging or making the systems larger than what would generally be required. As the pictures show, there's also a pretty good mature vegetative buffer or screening between the two properties now. So that area does act as a filtration and filter area for any stormwater runoff that does sheet flow off the site. So I believe that as it's matured over time, it's probably helping the stormwater system and management of the area than it did prior.
Thank you, sir.
No problem.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Mr. Toto, any other questions from the board?
Mr. Chair, if I could just, I think Charlie kind of touched on it, but the trash enclosure that you're proposing, and it just says enclosure, it's going to be a masonry enclosure, correct?
Correct.
correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you. I just want to get that on the record.
Okay, Mr. Toto,
I have nothing further for Mr. Siv, Mr. Chairman.
okay, you plan on bringing Ms. Coughlin back in further planning testimony to tonight?
No, I think she placed her comments on the record previously on March 8th, I believe it was. I don't know that she needs to clarify anything. I would defer to Jen if she needs to hear anything again, but I thought Allison hit on all points at the last hearing, Mr. Chairman. Yeah.
I would just add to that, I don't think that these changes that we're talking about this evening in terms of moving the trash enclosure and providing the drainage would impact the testimony that we heard at the last meeting. But I would ask Ms. Coughlin if she has anything to add. I was satisfied with the testimony at the last meeting as being in accordance with the statute for the D2 variance.
I'm just concerned that if they're addressing to 100-year floodplain, it's better, it's going to really affect the negative positive criteria even more so.
I think it's a positive
Right.
for their right. So I mean, you might want to bolster your testimony with respect to that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll call Ms. Coughlin then at this point to supplement her testimony, please.
Thank you.
Allison, you're still under oath. You've heard the test. You've heard some of the comments back and forth, specifically with regard to stormwater management. Could you expound on your testimony with regard to that aspect of the negative criteria?
Sure. As far as the changes that have been presented to the board tonight, it just lessens any potential negative impact. The trash enclosure was moved out of the farmland buffer, and by capturing stormwater runoff, we're going to decrease any impact on that neighbor. So it lessens the negative impact, which strengthens the arguments in favor of granting the variance.
Okay, thank you, Allison.
You're welcome.
Mr. Toda?
Mr. Chairman, I have nothing further.
Okay, Mr. Tropley, at this point in time, we need to open the public, correct?
That's correct. Mr. Toto, if you're resolved, no further witnesses, correct?
Correct, subject to perhaps comment from the, responding to the public comment, but correct, Mr. Tropley, yes.
Very well. Yes, Mr. Chair, I agree. Time to open.
Mr. Chairman,
I'll take a motion to open the public.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to open the public.
Okay.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded by Mr. Hughes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed. Okay, Eileen, at this time, we'll open for public questions or comments.
At this point in time, the chairman has opened the hearing up for questions or comments of the witnesses in the Home Sweet Home application. Please use the raise your hand feature and I'll bring you into the meeting one at a time. Again, if you're on the phone, you need to use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself. I keep losing. You need to unmute yourself, Ms. Brinkman.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Thank
My
you.
name is Maria.
Ms. Brinkman, before you continue, I believe you may have been here before, but you'll need to be sworn in again this evening. So if you'd raise your right hand, please. Swear the testimony you give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. And may we have your name, please, and your address?
Maria Brinkman and 57 Richard Road.
Okay, you may go ahead, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that they are still going to go through the process of putting four-season vegetation on the property between myself and the school.
Mr. Toda?
Well, actually, I would defer to Sherry to hear her comments. I think the board might be interested in what Sherry's site visit showed and what her opinion is on that. Because I think there's an existing buffer and whatever gaps there are, we're willing to fill in. But Sherry, I would defer to you on that.
Sure. Is Mrs. Brinkman, are you directly behind the property? Which one's yours?
Behind. 57, I'm just behind.
You're just behind. So I was there today, and it does look like there's a good buffer. You have cedar trees over there, which will provide the four-season buffer.
They're on my side.
I'm sorry, what?
On my side, on my side, but not on their side. Do you understand what I mean? They don't have a buffer per se on their property. I'm talking about my side of property. We've got some trees. Yes, we do.
I didn't ask whose trees they were. I mean, it appears that some of them are on their property, but I couldn't see your house. There are two very small gaps that, I had mentioned that we could put a tree in each gap just to fill the little, that area. But overall, I can't see the property, and they're evergreens, it's not deciduous. So you wouldn't see it any different in the wintertime either.
My idea about the four seasons was to decrease the noise. That was the first idea about that we asked for the four seasons. That was what we requested due to the noise.
Right. So, I mean, trees don't really block noise per se. It's more a visual thing that makes it appear that it's quieter. But it did appear that there is a decent buffer. And, I mentioned to Maria that a few additional trees would probably be appropriate for the area just because it's filled in very well.
I mean, during the summertime, you can see more because we have got some trees that they don't lose their leaves. So they are evergreens, but not all of them are evergreens. So during the winter time as well is quite bare. So are you going just to put two trees? That's it?
Well, Sherry, I would say that we would defer, and with the board's approval, defer to you for a site visit and work with you and Rob to create a plan to fill in the gaps to your satisfaction.
Yeah, I think just a few trees are all that's really required to fill in the gaps that are present. And, I was looking at the evergreen trees. They're mature cedar trees that are there.
So are you going to put the evergreens then?
Yeah, the trees that would be planted would also be evergreens. We wouldn't use deciduous trees for the buffer.
Mr. Toda?
Yes, sir.
Does the applicant have a problem, working with Sherry on filling in or do what's required in that back section?
No, of course not. Wherever gaps exist and whatever Sherry may recommend, we'll fulfill her recommendations to the T. Absolutely.
So I will leave it to her to fulfill what she says that it will be covered and there will be no gaps around it.
Yes. I believe that's what Mr. Toda agreed to.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brickman. Do you have any further questions?
No, that was my concern. Definitely is the noise aesthetically, and that we would have the four seasons trees that they mentioned before that they were going to do.
Okay, thank you. Eileen, is there anyone else?
Yes, I have one other caller.
Hello? Yes,
Okay, Mr. Layton,
yes.
you have video.
Is it on?
It is
No.
not on. We can hear you, but we can't see you. Want to
Mute?
just give it a try?
Yeah, what, my oldest son is away on vacation and I'm stuck here.
Yeah.
Let me try Derek. I need to get video on this. See if you can help me. Quickly, please. I have audio. I need to figure out, damn.
What's happening? What'd you do?
Here I am. I'm just trying to get video. I don't have video. Where's my video? Is there a button for video or something? Don't start touching stuff.
I don't see anything.
That's what a 13-year-old does. Start touching stuff. So where do we get video at?
I'm not seeing anything, Dad. I don't use Zoom. I use Google Meet.
Oh, excuse me.
Maybe something probably down here. Maybe press that. Yeah, press that one right there. I think.
Try that, huh?
And then let's see.
Select the speaker. It's nothing to do with camera.
Nothing there. I don't see the settings menu. So.
3 dots.
3 dots. Oh wait, no. Press that maybe.
You see 3 dots? Where? Move your finger.
3 dots there.
Where? Those?
Nope, nothing there. Yes, just go back and press the cog.
You act like I know what I'm doing, buddy.
Press this button.
That's not a button.
That is a button. Press that.
Press the arrow.
Idiot. No, not the arrow. The cog.
What is a cog?
The cog.
That thing there?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, let's see.
Frank.
Video.
Yeah.
Nope, I don't see anything. There's nothing much here. It doesn't turn on anything.
Mr. Chair, seeing that we seem to have some technical difficulties, but we can hear Mr. Layton loud and clear. I would have no objection if we could take his questions, and I will swear Mr. Layton in. Clearly some people do call in on the phone and they can do that. So, Mr. Layton?
Yes, sir.
Let's take you out of your pain. I will ask you to raise your right hand, and I will take it on faith that it is now raised, and I'm going to administer an oath. Do you swear that the testimony you'll give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
And state your name, please, your address as well.
Darrell Layton, 14 Alaska Avenue, Jackson, New Jersey.
Okay, and if I remember correctly from the previous meeting, you're the owner, the adjacent owner of Lot 14, correct?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
All right. I was just, at a young age, I've got a couple of young kids. They teach you to obey the law. Now, how can we not follow laws on the books? I got my young son next to me learning law, He wants to be a lawyer. That's just one of the things. I mean, they're still looking at continue with this construction in the buffer zone. I know they're saying that those large trees that are there, we planted them about 50 years ago. As a child, I planted those trees. That they're enough to contain the water that they're not, but they're not. I've got some pictures from a month or two ago with the water a day after a rainstorm just laying in the parking lot and coming across my property, just at the driveway area. So we had now 100-year rain this year, and we've got numerous pictures of the flooding over there. And as far as some screening, those trees are on my lot. They did say they're going to fill in some of the holes, but there's no screening towards the front. And another thing I'm worried about is farming is a dangerous business. We have a lot of machinery. It's just dangerous. And there's really no fencing that they have provided. I didn't really see anything on, but I didn't look. Are they going to fence that side of the property? In the back by the pool, they have a 4-foot fence, I believe, but there's no fencing from the front of the building to the street, and it's wide open. So that's another reason the trash blows through there. I was wondering, I don't have the site plan with me now. Is there going to be fencing there? And screening was another issue we had besides the water. At this point, I just wonder how we can go ahead and let them do something that's not allowed by law. That's just my question. Why do we have laws if we can get around them by doing what we're doing now? I just like to see this construction done on the other side of the building, or put the solar panels on the roof. It's not going to change the encroachment into the farmland buffer zone. You know, I know the Reynolds sold that property because they tried to expand and realized that they couldn't. And I understand. Next people bought it, and maybe they knew, maybe they didn't know. I just don't think that the way it's laid out is a good setup on the side of a qualified farm. And another question I had too was something I didn't think about last time. Is, you know, we do honeybees, and we get affected by sprays and herbicides all the time. So I just wondered if there was any way I could find out if they use any of that type of stuff, like, you know, mosquito spraying or any of that kind of stuff. Just another question I had to try and eliminate what I'm consuming, you know. Just something to put in notes, and maybe we can get an answer to that. Obviously, I wouldn't expect them to have an answer right now, but maybe we can figure that out as this continues. At this point, I don't have any more questions. Maybe I'd just like to get some answers.
I have a few questions, actually.
Thank you.
If I may?
Yes.
Mr. Layton, I was asking the attorney, but if it was okay for me to ask you a few questions at this time.
Certainly.
Do you have those pictures tonight?
I'm sorry.
I have them on my phone, but I would not have any idea. Derek, see if you can find my phone. I wouldn't have any idea how to get. I'm not a technical guy, obviously.
I understand, Mr. Layton, but you know, you knew this meeting was happening. You didn't think possibly to send those to me?
Yeah, no, I didn't think to send them to you.
Okay.
Probably would have been a good idea.
Assuming this meeting, assuming the vote is carried, I'd ask you to send me those pictures if you would, please, and to Ms. Ravano.
Right.
The question about the flooding, how long has this property been farmland assessed?
Farmland assessed, I believe, was 90, I believe. I'm sure you have the notes. I'm not certain on that.
Okay, no, fair enough. And have you ever lost a farmland assessment because of consistent flooding or the inability to raise crops, sell hay, sell fruit from the fruit trees, etc.? Have you ever lost that ability?
No, it just makes it difficult to farm when the tractor sinks and stuff like that. You know, I've had my truck stuck out there, heavy duty 4-wheel drive stuck. It's just something. The runoff is the other problem you try and worry about, is what's running off from the neighbors' farms, because we did have oil cleanup from the water running from the neighbor's oil tank onto our farm. It was a toxic cleanup. So you worry about these kinds of water overflowing onto your property.
Sure, but that's been resolved, and that was the prior.
Well, that was resolved, but that was a problem. I mean, there is still an oil tank on site, and if that did leak and we did get a 100-year flood in the same day, wouldn't that be terrible?
How was the house on the property heated on your property?
Excuse me?
How was the home on your property heated, the one on West Farms Road?
It's not heated.
It's not?
No.
But you have machinery on site, correct?
Yes.
Did they run on diesel?
No, gasoline.
Okay. You ever have any spills on your property?
No. Gasoline's expensive.
No, I understand that. And you indicate earlier regarding sprays or herbicides, we would certainly, as a condition of approval, ensure that any landscaper that we use does not use anything that might be harmful to the environment, and certainly not harmful to bees. We all like bees, Mr. Layton, so we certainly don't want to.
Yes.
Good neighbor, so we wouldn't want to compromise the health of the hives you have on site.
Yes, for sure.
So we would consent to that. As far as moving the improvements to the other side, we did testify as to why we were doing that. It primarily and solely had to do with the way the children are in classrooms together. The toddlers have to go to the bathroom. That's why the bathroom expansion's on that side, because the toddler classroom was on that side. And to flip and reverse would be, quite frankly, next to impossible. So, and I would add this use is not being discontinued. Not today, not tomorrow, and regardless of what might happen with this application, the use will continue. And I just want you to understand, as a farmer and as a man who understands and respects the environment, that what we're offering and proposing is a better situation than what exists today. You do appreciate that, yes?
Well, that would be, have to be seen. I mean, yeah, I would appreciate it. Excellent. I mean, but we just, as you get improvement, you get more volumes of the things that we're concerned about, You're going to have more.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
you're going to have more, roof space, more canopy space, more runoff. You have to be concerned about this. But there wasn't a problem to runoff, most of the time. But then that oil tank was an issue. I know it was resolved, but it still happened.
I'd like to ask my engineer, actually, Rob, with regard to the oil tank, and I can ask Maria this as well. The oil tank right now, is it above ground?
Yes, it is.
Maria, can you speak to that? Can you confirm that?
Yes, it's above ground on
Okay.
the opposite side of the property adjacent to Mr. Layton's.
On the westerly side. Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have nothing further for Mr. Layton at this point.
Draining the pool and the buffer's yours.
Yes, I already went through that.
Mr. Layton, do you have any further?
No, at this point, I don't.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Layton.
Okay, Eileen, do we have any other public?
Any other members of the public needing to ask questions or comments on this application, please use the raise your hand feature before the chairman closes the public portion. And I have no one else raising their hand.
Okay, at this time, I'll take a motion to close public
Close the public.
by Mr. Booth. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Who was that? Mr. Cantor?
Mr. Cantor.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Cantor. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. I just heard a bing.
That may have been me, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. If
Oh, okay.
I have one thing to add, and it's in accordance with what we discussed earlier. In light of the fact, the unfortunate fact that the board only has 5 members, I know things like labor can happen. Certainly, we've all been there, I suppose. I'd like to carry the meeting to the board's next available meeting without the need for further notice, and hopefully, if possible, those board members who are otherwise eligible might listen to the recording and perhaps go to a vote after a very brief summation at the next available hearing.
Okay, before we do that, is there any further questions or comments from the board members?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
All right, after hearing the testimony, and hearing from the public, 2 additional items that I believe should be addressed, of course, and Sherry, in the back of the property, not on the, the other side of the property line, but on the property line side of this particular, application, do we put a 4-foot berm? How do you satisfy Ms. Brinkman and the noise and, the attenuation that's coming from the property? And then the other thing, Mr. Chairman, and hearing Mr. Layton, if we have refuse that's blowing over onto his property, there's nothing to say. I mean, I have neighbors here in Candlewood that even put fences to stop, leaves going from one property to the other. A simple fence will probably catch a lot of that, so it doesn't blow over onto the farm. So these are the little things, that, still, are what's in the back of my mind, sir.
Any other comments from board members?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Would it be possible to take a quick glance at the most recent version of the plan so that I could see the incursion into the farmland buffer on the east side of the property?
Right. I just wanted to make a statement as far as the back of the property. I believe, looking at the elevations, it's a steep rise at the end of the property to where Miss Brinkman is. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Sherry, but doesn't that go up a hill there?
I don't really recall that. I thought we just walked out flat.
And then the farm, isn't that going, it kind of goes up in the back?
I really just walked with Maria to the back area where, we were looking for the residential complaint. I didn't look along the farm side.
Okay, well, if we could bring those photos back up that we have, I think it kind of shows it. Okay.
Yeah, it's just flat there. We just walked to the edge of those trees.
Okay. And then you're talking about the holes there.
Pretty flat, I think, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And
Right,
Mr. Cantor wanted to see the site plan?
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to see the left side of particularly the incursion into the farmland buffer on the left side.
I don't know if that's what you need or the actual
Yeah,
plan.
exactly. All right, so where is the farmland buffer versus where the
Eileen, I think it might be best to show the
The
black
site
and white
plan
site
itself. Yeah, the variant sketch and site.
Charlie,
plan.
that's the one that you had up, right?
Yeah, do you want me to share it or?
Please.
Yep. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
So from the easterly property line, this 41.82 feet. So our ordinance requires 50 feet. So it's another 8.18 feet. So, probably a third of this addition here is within that 50-foot buffer. This recharge run of pipe that we discussed previously, Mr. Siv has indicated this could be relocated elsewhere on site, so not in the buffer. So it's really just the addition and then the proposed canopy expansion to the, I guess that's southeast of the existing building. There's already a pool that's existing in the buffer and some sheds. What's proposed new is just the canopy expansion and the addition.
Along with the pole barn.
Charlie, the canopy actually is over an existing, I guess, encroachment, so to speak, into the buffer, correct?
So there is a play area that's fenced in, and that canopy is over the play area.
Right.
So, it's a pervious area right now, so it's not like a concrete pad, but yes, it is a fenced play area, at least as shown on the site plan. And then, Mr. Chair, the pole barn they've relocated it, so it's out of the 50-foot residential buffer to the rear, and then it's also another 109 feet from the easterly side property line, so more than out of the 50-foot farmland buffer along the east. So really, it's the canopy and it's the addition.
Thank you.
And then, Mr. Chair, I just want to make a comment. I think it was brought up at the last meeting regarding the pool backwashing discharge. While I'd either ask if that's on a filter cartridge, if it's not, then that the backwash be directed into one of the proposed on-site dry wells. Is that acceptable? So it's not just flowing over grade onto the neighbor's property? Can I get a yes and just not a head shake?
Yes.
Rob, that's a yes, Charlie. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you.
Better.
Is that all you have, Charlie?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I think, I direct this to Mr. Siv, and it's just might be helpful for the board. I'll share my screen right now just to give the board some perspective. So this is Google Earth, readily available aerial imagery. This is aerial imagery dated March 1995, 321 West Farms. That's the subject property. This shows what was on the site in 95. There's a pool, appears to be a building, concrete pad area in the back, the U-shaped driveway, the parking area. 2002, same improvements, predominantly in the same footprint. To current day, or most readily available current day. This is May 2019. There isn't a significant difference other than, the area for the play area, the two sheds. So like the applicant noted, a lot of this stuff has existed for a significant amount of time. Any new impervious proposed with this application, they're proposing to completely infiltrate the 100-year storm, which is above and beyond what is even required for the application. This is not a major development. They're not over an acre disturbance. They're not over a quarter acre of impervious. So, they are doing substantial stormwater management. And, should the board rule favorably, it's going to be a requirement of the condition approval. They have to satisfy me from a stormwater management perspective, and the board knows that I take stormwater management very seriously. So if it's not to my standards and acceptable, they'll have to come back to the board. Like I said, should the board rule favorably.
Charlie, are you able to estimate where the rear property line might be? I just want to get a gauge on.
I cannot, if I was in my office, I had the GIS parcel lines, which are 100% accurate. But, it's hard to tell where exactly. I know you have a fence line along the back here, which is approximately where the property line is. I can't see in the area where exactly that is.
Okay. Thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I understand Mr. Saya's concerned about the garbage, but I don't know if a fence, in my opinion, is going to look good on this property. I'd rather see some of the implements and maybe some more four-season shrubs. If there's going to be an issue with the garbage, I don't think it's going to be because we have an enclosed garbage place. And if there is an issue, they can always go to the code enforcer and, they can make a complaint about it. I just don't think the fence is going to be appropriate for this site. That's just my take. Not that I want to disagree with Mr. Saya, but I just don't think a fence is going to make it look better.
If I could just interject for 1 second, Mr. Saya, I understand your concern, but I think the issue with the garbage will be better because we're moving because right now the dumpsters are right on that property line, right on that eastern property line adjacent to the farm. Where they're relocating the dumpsters are to the absolute opposite side of the property, on the other side of the building. So between the area, and it will be in an enclosure instead of just the dumpsters freely on the site. But the building will be in between where those dumpsters are and Mr. Layton's farm. So I think the concern about the garbage, which is 100% legitimate, but I think that will be mitigated by the relocation of the enclosure. As far as garbage is concerned, I don't really opine on the rest of it, but that piece of it, I think should be addressed by relocating the dumpsters to the opposite side of the site.
And to add to that, Mr. Chair, they're currently dumpsters in no enclosure. They're proposing an enclosure, which is going to be fenced as well. So that'll, assist in stopping trash from leaving the enclosure and, going downstream.
That satisfies me, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Saya. Okay, any further from the board members? Okay, Mr. Toto?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I want to mention, my clients corrected me that the fence and the trees at the rear are all hers. So anything beyond the fence would be the Brinkmans. Just wanted to bring that to the board's attention. I think there's some confusion about the property line, perhaps. I'm not saying Ms. Brinkman was being purposefully incorrect with her facts, but the fence to the rear and the buffering or the existing trees are actually the applicants. They're Maria's trees and fence. Just want to make that clear.
Okay, but you already agreed to work with Sherry on filling in.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, no, sure. I'm not taking that back.
That's fine. Okay.
Not taking that back at all. Just wanted to clarify. Yeah.
Also, let's not forget, because it's obviously not there yet because the board hasn't acted on it, but there's going to be a pole barn in the rear of the property as well. And I agree with Sherry that trees don't necessarily attenuate noise. Its structure generally attenuates noise. And so the pole barn, while it's not going to solve it 1000%, it will help mitigate any kind of noise extending beyond that rear property line. It's kind of like a block a little bit. But again, I also don't want to mislead anybody that, if the board chose not to act favorably on the application, the use is allowed to continue as it stands today. So, there's not going to be an ultimate solution for, kids playing in the back of that facility, so just to weigh that out, there's always going to be a little noise, but it falls well within the state statute, and there's no noise on the property after 10 p.m., which is when the decibel level comes from 65 to 50, because the facility's not open at that time. So I just want the board to know that the pole barn will help with the noise attenuation a little bit. In addition to whatever trees or shrubs or whatever Shari decides is appropriate back there.
Okay. Okay, Eileen, when is our next available date?
We have a meeting June 14th. We have a meeting June 28th. July 12th.
Mr. Chair, is it necessary to push this to another date?
Well, you know, it's totally up to the applicant, but you know, all he needs is one vote to go against him and it fails.
Got it.
So
I appreciate the comments and your comment, Mr. Saya. I do. Eileen, I'm sorry. Is it the 14th you said? Was that June 14th?
June 14th is our next meeting.
Okay, I promise I won't take up too much of the board's time that evening. And we would ask for a vote to be called at that time.
Okay, Eileen, how booked up are we that night?
We have 2 applications on that night.
Are they difficult applications or?
I didn't think tonight's were difficult, so I don't know.
Okay, what we could do is try to get them up first, because since there's no more testimony, it's just going to be
a vote,
closing statement, and a rendered vote.
No problem.
Need to make sure to reach out to the absent board members or board members that have. Mr. Gonzalez, would you please review this case so you're prepared to vote June 14th?
Sure.
I appreciate that. Okay, and just reach out to the other members, make sure that everybody reviews it.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, and they're good till June 30th, so that's fine.
Okay. Case number BA 1823, Home Sweet Home Daycare Center, Inc. will be carried to June 14th with no further notice, and their expiration date is June 30th. Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate it. Thank you, board members, board professionals. Eileen, thank you very much.
You're
We'll see
welcome,
you guys
Mr.
soon.
Toto. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, Eileen, we're going to take a 10-minute break, please.
Okay, the board will take a 10-minute recess. They'll be back at 8:33.
Okay, Eileen, you want to call us back?
The zoning board will now reconvene.
Give everybody an opportunity to get back.
The zoning board will reconvene.
Mr. Hughes, you there?
Okay.
Okay. Our next case on the agenda, case number BA 2103, Diamond Communications LLC, Singular Wireless PCS LLC, AT&T and Cellco Partnerships DBA is Verizon Wireless. Conditional use variance, bulk variance, preliminary and final major site plan. Application Diamond Communication LLC, New Singular Wireless PCBS LLC, AT&T, Cellco Partnerships DBA Verizon Wireless is applicant. Regent Equities LLC is owner seeking conditional use variance, bulk variance, preliminary and final major site plan approval to construct a new 150-foot high monopole telecommunications tower, new antennas and related accessory equipment for AT&T and Verizon and 2 future carrier antennas with new gravel equipment compound to service the equipment. A 12-foot wide gravel driveway to connect the proposed compound and parking area to the existing bituminous parking lot behind Athena's Diner. The proposed compound will include a Verizon propane tank, 30 kW generator, utility cabinet, and equipment in AT&T walk-in cabinet and 35 kW generator, which will be located within the 50 by 50 foot gravel compound. And compound will be enclosed by a 6-foot high chain link fence. Premises known as Block 1431.01, 6825 through 6849 US Highway 9 North. This application was partially heard on April 12th, 2021, when it was carried to May 24th, 2021, with no further notice. Expiration date, May 31st, 2021. Eligible voters: Cantors, Hughes, Mertens, Moretti, Saya, Stanton, and Nance. Welcome.
Hi, good evening. How are you? Again, just
wanted to remind you, we're down board members tonight, and we don't have a full board. And I'm going to ask Mr. Gonzalez, are you up on this case by chance?
No, I'm not, Chairman.
Okay. Okay, so we have 5 eligible voters tonight. So, you know, I'm going to leave that up to you, sir.
Sure, thank you. So I think we'd like to proceed in the same fashion as the last applicant, where we present our testimony tonight, see if the board has any feedback, and then make a decision as we go along to see if we should just carry a vote or if we would like a vote for tonight, if that's okay with the board.
Okay, Mr. Tropoli?
I have no objection, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you. Just again, for the record, my name is Christopher Quinn, here on behalf of the applicant. Again, this property is the Athena Diner. Just to remind you, we were here last month. We put on a presentation from our radio frequency engineer to describe why we're proposing a new telecommunications tower on this property, how this will help both Verizon and AT&T, and we expect other carriers as well. How this will be located in the rear of the property. We had our radio frequency engineers testify, as well as our civil engineer testify. The board had a number of questions and concerns. We think we've answered them. Hope we've answered a lot of them. We submitted revised plans, which had some additional information that was requested of us, as well as I know the board's primary concern was about the location of the pole with respect to the nearest property line. We have an alternate design option to let the board choose if they prefer one over the other, which certainly increases the setback, although there's other factors and considerations for the board here. But with that being said, if there's no other questions, I can bring up our civil engineer to continue his testimony and describe the changes made to the plans, as well as other options we have for you.
Okay, sir.
Okay, great. So Josh, I see you're here. Still under oath?
Yes.
Okay. What I'd like you to do is to walk through the additional changes we made to the plans. I know we submitted revised plans. I'd like you to walk through the changes that were made to them. I know one was with respect to the generator questions and the like from the board, the additional information we have, and then we can talk about the locations. I think the fall zone was always a question from the board.
Sure. I'm just going to put up the plans and share my screen. Can everyone see that?
No. Does he need permission, or does he have permission to share a screen?
You should be able to.
Oh, I see it. It's starting. Okay.
Good.
Okay. Well,
Okay. Just to
and Mark.
This is his plan set. It's 825.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Great. And what sheet are you referring to, Josh?
So right now I'm going to refer to the site plan, which is the, let me just get rid of this, which is sheet SP2.
Okay.
So just to remind everyone, Route 9 is runs south to north, going up on the page on the left side. And the proposed tower is located right here. 50 feet from the south property line, 158.5 feet from the residential property line, and 249 feet to the northerly side property line. There was some talk last time about existing septic fields. We did some research with the Monmouth County Health Department, and we were able to locate where we feel these existing septic fields are based on the data we retrieved. We think there are 2 existing septic fields, one here, and then there's another one over here. Currently, and we also found that, yes, there is indeed sanitary sewer within Route 9. The existing buildings to the north are connected to that sewer. The existing diner is not, because it was abandoned at the time of the sewer installation. So that is still connected to the septic fields, but once that building is put back into use, they will convert and tie up to the existing sewer system, and the septic fields will be abandoned. So the septic fields aren't in play with regard to our location of the facility. There was another concern about an existing 20-inch oak tree. So I'm just going to go to the woodlands management plan that we have. This is the 20-inch oak tree right here. And as you can see, this hatched area is the proposed gravel driveway. And we did the best we can to make a jog in that driveway to try to avoid any damage to that tree and to preserve it the best we can. Another modification we made to the plan was with regard to the fencing. There was a request to, instead of just having the galvanized finish on the fence, that it's actually, we provide like a black coating. So we did update that detail. We also updated the fence detail to reduce the size of the mesh opening. So we went from a 2-inch mesh opening to a 1-inch mesh opening. And I think those are the major changes.
The generator from the propane generator?
Oh, right. So as we talked last time, AT&T was proposing a natural gas generator and Verizon was proposing a propane generator. Verizon agreed to eliminate the propane and just go with a natural gas generator. So you can see we'll go to the enlarged view. The propane tank has been removed from the inside of the compound. Actually, this is a better view. And we changed it to a natural gas generator, which saves space within the compound for future carriers as well.
And that won't cause any problems in terms of noise or anything else. There still won't be an issue in terms of.
Right. Yeah. So we meet all the required noise limits at the property line.
Okay. Now again, where we have, this is the initially proposed option for this design, correct?
Correct.
So again, just to highlight this for the board, and I'll ask you to go back to SP2, the overall site plan. In terms of the site, it's located away from the rear of the property line within the fall zone. It's located within, I guess, all the other tower setback requirements except with respect to the property to the south.
Correct. So the required fall zone for this tower is 150 feet. We are only 50 feet to this sideline. But I tried to make the argument last time where I believe this is actually one of the safest places for this tower as far as fall zone, for a few reasons. One, the area on the adjacent lot is not developed currently and is environmentally restricted, so will be undevelopable in the future. And although we extend 100 feet into that property, like I said, there's nothing developed there.
And we did provide a letter from the owner of that property that said they'd object to the setback of the tower.
Correct, and that's another reason, is because this property is under common ownership, and that owner, provided a letter acknowledging and accepting that this tower is within 100 feet with a fall zone within that property.
And what do you mean common ownership?
It's two separate entities. However, the principle of one is a principle of the other.
Okay, so that could change.
It could, yes, it certainly could change, and properties can always be sold as well, yes.
Okay.
Additionally, can you just describe the structural integrity of the tower as well, just in terms of how fall zone works? Is there, in the very unlikely event of a structural concern or issue with this tower, in terms of any kind of failures, how would that ultimately work? And just remind that for the board.
Right, so essentially the tower is not designed yet, but of course it'll be designed according to the telecommunications industry's standards. It's a steel structure. So usually, when we talk about failure of a steel structure, it's the point where the steel bends, deforms, and doesn't go back to its original condition. So that's pretty much failure. So what happens with failure of a tower like this, the tower would bend, keep on bending, deform, and when it deforms, it'll bend over, not necessarily detach from itself, but it'll bend over, and as it does, it reduces the wind load area. And that bending would most likely occur to the top third portion. So we're not talking about failure at the base of the 150-foot tower. We're talking about failure somewhere in the upper 2/3 or so. So the 150-foot fall zone really turns into 50-foot fall zone, theoretically.
Okay. Now, given this, again, the board still had concerns about the fall zone and about this tower being so close to the southern property line. We did go back, we worked with the property owner. You did come up with an alternate location that could work for this tower on this property as well. Is that correct?
I'll go to that exhibit. And also, didn't mention that the tower right now, the fall zone on the property, doesn't reach any of the parking areas or the storage facility right here. It stays out of all of the existing improvements that are on that site right now.
Josh, if I could just ask a clarifying question on the fall zone with the pole too. So we said that the pole itself is designed that the upper third will fail first, and it's not a sudden, where it fractures and falls over. It's going to deform and then like bend over from the, so, 100 foot of the pole is still standing, and then the top 50 feet would then bend over, right? And then say at that point, is there any chance that the pole as is existing, 100 feet, could that then bend over, like fail at the base of the pole at that point? Or is it designed to not fail at the base 100%?
Well, this is all theoretically, but once we got the deformation up on, say at 100-foot level, and the tower bends, as it bends and deforms, the wind load area decreases. So the wind is acting on less of the structure, which would make further failure unlikely.
Okay, and then also you talked about wetlands and buffer being located on the southerly property, and then the property owner, saying they took no issue with the proposed pole location. Now, say that property changed ownership and someone wants to develop that property. is there, what kind of permits would be required? I mean, the property could potentially be developed, but it would require, you know, extensive environmental permits on their behalf to develop it into the buffer and possibly any wetlands.
Right, yeah, so the wetlands delineation we have does extend onto the property. This line here, you can see, is the wetlands line. It stops here. But just based on DEP mapping, my belief is this whole area down in here is not only within the wetlands, but also within the 100-year flood zone. So permitting this site would be very difficult, if not possible, to get, you know, DEP permits for the development within there.
Okay, and then just to circle back to the septic. So as part of this application, the applicant is agreeing to abandon both septic systems for the diner. And then at some point in the future, when the owner of the property decides to redevelop the diner, they'll be required to hook up to the public sewer at that time. But as far as this application go, will the applicant agree to abandon those septic systems?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're not in use right
The
now.
one that's along the southerly property line definitely has to be abandoned, and then the other one obviously is not in the footprint of your driveway. But you know, I think it would be just cleaner from a Board of Health perspective and from this board's perspective that, you know, they both be abandoned at this time. And that's something that Mr. Quinn, if you want to double back with the applicant and the property owner before we conclude tonight.
Sure.
Also, Charlie,
Yes, Mr. Chair.
okay, why can't we just move this tower to where it's,
We're getting there. We're going to get there, Mr. Chairman.
okay,
I'll have some questions along that lines too, Mr. Chair. We'll let them present their case.
oh, okay. Okay, Mr. Quinn?
Okay. Anything further with respect to this particular design and this site?
No.
No?
The only thing, just like Charlie, I'm gonna reiterate what Charlie said, especially the septic system on the southerly border, that would need to be abandoned if it stays as is.
Certainly. I mean, that's occupied our space.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board?
I'll hold my question till when it's appropriate.
Okay,
And my only question was about the septic under the driveway, but we've addressed it, so thank you.
okay. Mr. Saya?
I'm good, Mr. Chairman. I'm just gonna wait and,
Okay.
you know.
Mr. Martins?
I'm good for now.
Okay,
Okay.
Mr. Mr. Gonzalez?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Quinn?
Okay. So let's, Mr. Chairman asked this question. Why don't we go to the next exhibit, and we have an option that we could work with here.
So this is our alternate location that would be our second choice. So we moved the tower 115.2 feet off that side property line. It does get closer to the rear residential line, 104 feet, so we don't meet the fall zone there. However, this is also environmentally sensitive back here, likely undevelopable.
In what area, in what sense? It's both C1 and wetlands?
Same one. Here's the C1 buffer line here. This is all wetlands back here and within the 100-year floodplain. And then we'll be 184.6 feet off the northerly side property line, so we meet the fall zone there. We still have this jog in the driveway that would protect that 20-inch tree. It will require additional woodland removal, tree removal. I don't have specific tree locations in this area, but just by comparing it to the density of the trees from the previous location, we'll be removing additional 7 to 8 trees on this location.
And again, we asked to be able to make contribution to the tree fund.
Correct. And that sheet was also updated. If you recall last time, there was an error on the plan that showed we were adding 10 trees, but we're actually not. So we'll update that. So that has been updated.
Why can't we move this 150 foot off the residential, at least the 150 foot, you know, you've got, I think you'll be short 6 inches somewhere if you move this to where it's compliant. Why can't this be compliant? You know, you said earlier, you know, it's a common owner, put it compliant. You know, there's no reason it can't be compliant.
Well, there is, the property isn't wide enough. There's always going to be a fall zone setback.
Yeah, but I'd rather it be 6 inches than 50 feet.
Right. Well, so we increased it from 50 feet to 115 feet.
I know, but increase it, you know, move it 150 feet off of the residential line, move it 100, you've got the footage to do it.
Yeah,
I think you'll be down 6 inches.
I think what the chairman is alluding to is there's an already cleared grass area, central portion of the site, where it appears that the compound could be located, be fully compliant with the 150-foot setback to the easterly property line, which is a residential zone and property, and then also almost entirely compliant to either the north or the south property line as far as 150 feet. You know, the property frontage is 297 feet. So, you know, and I don't know if the two lot lines north and south are 100% parallel to each other. But I mean, if it was just 297 feet, you know, that's a 3 foot difference. If you can be 150 feet on one side and 147 feet on the other side, that's almost compliant to all 3 fall zones. And I think that's what the chairman is getting at here. And
you're not going to be in the woods. You're not going to be in the woodland. You're just barely going to touch the wood line.
And you may not need the retaining wall.
Exactly.
You're probably talking about putting it right here, which puts the tower a lot closer to the operations of the existing property.
What's
as well as close to the highway.
If the concern is the fall zone, you know, you're getting it closer to where people work, where buildings are.
What is right there?
This is the working storage yard for the fence company. Right in here, this fence here. This is where they store their materials.
Okay, now the question then, is that on the same property?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, then why are we, okay, then what makes this property so suitable to have this?
We're going to get there. We have another witness, which we're going to talk about, our planner, as well as to describe this. I mean, again,
I'm telling you right now, you need to bring this more compliant than what you've got right here.
Now, Mr. Chairman, we're working with you. I mean, we're doing what we can here. We increased it.
Mr. Quinn, if I might, I do think that your applicant's team provided testimony at the last meeting as to why you didn't want to move it, which was because the property owner wants to reserve his right to do future development. That's not justification for a variance. And you have the area to be more compliant than you are. I think the chairman is strongly suggesting that this tower be moved such that you're off by 3 feet on one property line versus compliant on one property line and deficient on 2. So, you know, your issues with the property owner are not really subject for the board, but you said it. And so now we know why you're not interested in moving it. And quite honestly, you know, I guess the sentiment is that is not really part of what we're going to consider. So right now, and I agree, you still have testimony to put on, so I'm going to reserve judgment on, you know, whether or not the application, in my opinion, has met the standards, because of course the board always asks my opinion after said testimony. But I would just strongly suggest you think very hard about what the chairman is saying, because absent a very, very good reason, I think you're going to have a hard time with the location that you're proposing.
Okay, thank you for that input. And again, what I'd ask is just for the board to, two things. Number one, I just ask the board keep an open mind and hear our witness and hear our understanding as to why these two locations are appropriate here. We hear what you're saying. One thing I would like to point out is that, you know, in terms of location, it wasn't just one reason why this is it, and that wasn't what was testified at the last meeting. Certainly, the requirements of the owner is a concern and something we have to satisfy. We have to satisfy lots of concerns. Whenever you build any project, there's many issues you have to work around in terms of building something. But again, just to reiterate the testimony that was given both tonight and previously, it wasn't just the owner's direction, but there's a number of other benefits where the location of the pole serves, including having the fall zone with these environmentally sensitive areas that really isn't area that's prone for development. And that was one of the points we've been trying to testify. So we hear you. I'd ask to let my planner give testimony if there's no other questions for our engineer. And then again, we can continue to have this conversation, but I just want to have the board have an understanding of all of the information, not just looking at this plan from this site plan, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Quinn, you mentioned the property owner. Is this property owner the same property owner that owns the property that the Athena Diner now sits on?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same property, so yes.
What plans have been made to renovate that abandoned fire burnt out building that sits at the beginning of the entrance to Howell Township on Route 9?
I believe, like I said, I think what was testified. Josh, can you give any testimony about any future development here?
I'm not aware of any, no.
Okay. I think the understanding was that the owner is looking to develop this property in the future, is looking to have a future development here of the property.
All right, it's sat there abandoned, as I mentioned, right at the entrance to my hometown for over 5 years. It's a concern.
Understood. Again, sadly, a lot of, between the recession and COVID, there's been a lot of challenges in the commercial real estate market over the past several years. I'm sure everyone's been aware and everyone's been dealing with. I'm sure this board's definitely been aware of it. And certainly allowing us to invest in this property, invest in the town, is certainly something that will help, I think, ultimately the full development of this property as well. So with that being said, if there's no other questions, I can bring up our planner. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Brian?
Yes.
I believe you were sworn in the last meeting. Is that correct? Or were you?
I believe I was.
I don't think we qualified him.
Okay. Why don't you just give the board the benefit of you're still under oath. I'd ask you to give the board the benefit of your professional and educational background, please.
Sure. I have a Bachelor of Science in Landscape Architecture from Temple University. I've been working in the field of land use planning, land development consulting since 1997. I'm a licensed landscape architect and New Jersey professional planner in the state of New Jersey and certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners. I've testified in front of numerous boards and commissions similar to this. However, I've not been qualified before this board previously.
Jennifer, you good?
I'm good.
Okay, we accept your credentials.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you've heard testimony from the previous witnesses, correct?
I have.
What I'd ask you to do is to describe to the board what you've done to prepare for your testimony for tonight's hearing. And then to describe your opinion with respect to the variances that are being requested. And in doing so, once you're done with that, I'd like you to talk and evaluate. You've heard the questions and concerns of the board members. I'd ask you to then evaluate the different locations and go through any exhibits you have with respect to those for this particular poll. Okay, so again, talk about why we need a site here and that particular variance relief, but additionally, I think the variance as the board is most concerned about is the fall zone.
Okay. You asked for a lot of things, so I'll take breaks and make sure I'm addressing everything you would like there. To answer your first question, what we did to prepare for the meeting, we reviewed the zoning map, the land use map, the zoning land use regulations for the area. We visited the site and we conducted what we call balloon tests to prepare photographic simulations that were provided with the application. We also reviewed land use plans and master plans from both the county and the township here. As I mentioned, our first step was conducting a balloon test and visiting the project area. We have submitted that balloon test. If you'd like me to pull that up, or if somebody else would like to pull that up, just let me know.
Eileen? You're muted, Eileen.
There we go.
I have no idea what the balloon test is.
Are you're referring to your photo simulations?
Yes. So
Okay.
for the just
Four
as a,
sheets. Correct?
yes, the photo. Can I share my screen?
You can if you want
Sure,
to do
please.
it.
Just note whenever you pull it up, Eileen, let's make sure that they're marked as exhibits.
They are marked. I believe it's 829.
Okay. Just give a brief description of the area or the shot.
Sure. So can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
So Brian,
what
is
we
this
did,
planning exhibit?
Oh, wait, no, that's different. Hold on.
Oh, the A23.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we lost the photo.
It's in here. It's part of the package.
No, we lost it on the screen.
Oh, he's just on the cover page.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Brian.
So before I get into the exhibit, I'll describe the balloon test. Basically what we do is we go out to the location of the proposed tower. We fill a large red balloon filled with helium, and we fly that balloon to the height of the proposed tower. While the balloon is in flight, we drive around the area to determine where it's visible and identify where the tower would potentially be visible. So that's what we are showing in this exhibit, A23, entitled Photograph Inventory and Simulations. The second page of that exhibit is an aerial photograph. What's identified at the center of the aerial photograph is a yellow star identified as the tower location. The concentric rings are 1/4 mile and 1/2 mile radius, and the arrows correspond with photographs and locations that are provided in this packet. The yellow arrows indicate locations where we could see the balloon and we prepared photo simulations. The white arrows represent locations where we were not able to see the balloon. So moving along through view number 1 from Alexander Avenue. My apologies, I'm just referencing the plan here. From Alexander Avenue and the auto body shop in that area. What's identified here off to the left is the existing tower. That's actually the existing transmission tower that's located to the south of us. However, the balloon was not visible in this location. View number 2 from Lexington Avenue. This is from the south. Again, looking across the transmission towers to the tower in this location. View 3 from Lexington Avenue and East Kentucky, Kennedy Boulevard, my apologies, just over the roof line of the business, or I'm sorry, the commercial buildings in the foreground. View 4 from Kennedy Boulevard, again, looking down the main corridor, see the transmission towers and a simulated view of the proposed tower. View 5, again, from more of the residential area over in Lakewood Township here from Kennedy Boulevard and Heathwood Avenue. Again, in this view, it was not visible. In view 6 from Highway 9, in the retail center. Again, the transmission towers in the foreground, the proposed tower in the background. From Ford Road, view number 7. In this view, it is visible just above the building, basically at the end of the roadway, above the utility lines. And further back from Ford Road and Irene Boulevard, in this view, it was not visible. You're far enough away and it's obscured from the vegetation that it was not visible. View 9 from Irene Boulevard. A benefit to this is that we did this balloon test early enough in the year before the trees were in a leaf on condition. So we are able to see through the trees and identify where the balloon was. So we did identify the balloon within the trees here. However, obviously in a leaf on condition, the tower would not be visible from this location. View 10 from Highway 9, further down the road, showing the tower. View 11, again, further down the roadway, it kind of blends in with the other utilities and lights and utility poles in the area. From view 12 on Alexander Avenue, just above the building in this location. And view 13 from Highway 9, showing it just above, in this case, the coffee shop and above the building in that area. Just going back to the key map on the second page, generally what we found with the investigation here is that the tower, the balloon, is primarily visible from the US Highway 9 corridor and the main surrounding commercial areas. When we get back into the more residential areas, obviously you can see the extensive vegetation in these areas. The vegetation that's out there does a good job of blocking views from the residential area. I'm going to change exhibits if there's no questions regarding the balloon test or the photo simulations.
Any questions, board? No.
Chair, if I could just have Mr. Seidel clarify. So like you said, you floated a balloon that's approximately at the 150-foot height of the pole, and then you've graphically superimposed, it's roughly pretty close to scale, what the monopole with 2 co-located cell receivers would look like?
That's correct. I don't believe I described that, but you are correct. So while the balloon was in flight, we obtained photographs of the balloon. We brought them back into the office in the computer with digital programming software, superimposed the view of the tower into that photograph. And if I can just describe one other detail of the balloon test, we actually floated 2 balloons, one large balloon at the top and one below that, 20 feet below it. That helps us identify the scale and proportion of the tower as well.
Yeah, Charlie, they do this a lot with billboard applications as well, where they put like a crane up and then they drop the boom to get the scale and then they superimpose whatever you're supposed to be looking at.
No, that's good. I just want the board to know what they're seeing as a accurate representation of what this is going to look like once it's constructed.
Yeah.
And again, all these locations are for the initially proposed location, right?
That's correct.
That's correct. And do you think any of these views would be significantly changed for the alternate location that's shown, that was shown in the last exhibit?
I really don't. Once you start talking about views of the tower from a quarter mile away and a half mile away, the impact of moving it slightly 100 feet in one direction or the other is pretty negligible.
Okay. So this certainly goes to visual impact. Can you talk about the positive and negative criteria for the variance is required?
Sure. The next component that we did, again, looking at land use maps. The exhibit that I have in front of you is identified by the existing DCL Athena Diner existing land use map. And this was identified as exhibit
822.
What's the date? This was May 12th, so now we're referring to 829, I believe.
829, correct.
Okay. 829 is a small assessment of the township for the existing land use map. Again, we've identified the tower location with a yellow star in this view. And based on the land use data, generally what we're showing is the red and purple color is commercial, urban, industrial land uses. The uncolored area are generally vegetated woodland areas, and the yellow areas were the designated residential land uses. So what we can see from this assessment here is the tower is generally central to the commercial areas. And while we are close to a residential district and zoning line, that property is not in current residential use. It's also important to point out in this location, the HD1 zoning district generally flares out as it approaches the boundary with Lakewood Township. So it does get wider, widens out where you get some larger lots down in these areas. However, it is important to note this tower location is further away from the residential areas from the east and from the west up in Alexander Avenue. The next map associated with this packet, and I'm sorry, is exhibit 829. Does it contain the 3 exhibits or was that just 1 exhibit?
It's
It had 4 sheets.
4 sheets. Okay, thank you. So the next area or the next exhibit that was provided is a more close-up detailed view of this area. What we're showing in this location identified with the yellow boundary is the subject property. Again, we've identified the tower location and we prepared this to build on the engineer's testimony at the last meeting that we feel this is the safest location for this proposed tower. And basically what we're showing in this area is the extensive area of the wetland buffers, the special resource buffer areas, in the impact on the surrounding area. We've also identified a 300-foot buffer from residentially zoned land to get an idea of the context or separation that's required. And it's, well, maybe not a 300-foot buffer per se, it is 200% from residential zoning districts and zoning lines, which does create a significant area. Up here in the top part of the exhibit, that 300-foot buffer does cross US Highway 9 and creates a big restriction. But we do see how with all of the wetland buffers that the engineer previously described on the property below us, how that wetland area really tucks back on our property, and we're able to tuck that tower back into that location to get that off the roadway. And the third exhibit is a detailed view or a more detailed view of the site, and basically showing at our originally proposed location with a 150-foot radius attached to it, showing that we can comply with a 1-to-1 setback from the residential zoning district line. There's no impact on the other property lines other than the southern property line. And the southern property line, as was indicated, is common partners with the subject property here. And more importantly, what we're showing is that this is the wetland and buffer area. We provided the aerial photograph in this area, so it's easy to see what is currently developed with the building on the southern property, the parking in front of the property, and parking vehicular access at the rear of the property. And again, that 150-foot fall zone, while it encroaches on that southern property line, it doesn't impact the parking, it doesn't impact the building, and it's completely within the wetland and buffer area.
I actually think that's the better spot.
Any other questions regarding these exhibits?
No.
Okay.
Board, do you have any questions? Jen, Charlie?
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Nothing, Mr. Chair.
So then, if I can go on, Mr. Quinn, I believe you asked about the positive and negative criteria in this area.
Yes.
The other component that we looked at to build on these exhibits is looking at the zoning perspective. Where are towers permitted within the township here? So we reviewed the area, generally a half-mile radius that was shown in the original aerial map here to determine what would be available in this area. The HD1 zoning district is the only zoning district that permits towers that's within this area, and based on the radio frequency testimony would satisfy needs for coverage in this area. We did look into Lakewood Township since we are close to the municipal boundary. In Lakewood Township, there's no property that's appropriately zoned for a communications tower. The closest zoning district would be 2 miles away. Again, Howell Township, this is the only zoning district where communication towers would be permitted. When we looked further into the area on the larger key maps, and we applied all of the setback regulations that were discussed, a 200% setback from residential districts, 1-to-1 setbacks from occupied buildings, 1-to-1 setbacks from all property lines. There's really no property that could accommodate a tower and be outside of all of the environmental areas. So that goes through the justification of the tower on this property and in this location specifically, why it is suitable for this property. All the other properties that were identified in the area did have some other kind of constraints. You can see reviewing the existing land use map. Again, the tower location, our subject property is generally larger, as is the southern property line than most of all the other properties that are to the north. And again, the shape of the zoning district narrows down to make it more problematic as you move to the north. So regarding justification, it's important to note that communications towers are permitted by conditional use in the underlying district. We do believe the site is appropriate for the proposed use. This is located central to the coverage gap. It's located in a commercial zoning district with other surrounding commercial uses. It's screened by mature vegetation, which could be seen throughout the balloon test and photo simulations that we provided. It's also a great justification for having screening the tower on site and the vegetation that's on the property. There's minimal visual impact to the residential areas at all. And any visibility is really limited to the commercial corridor of Highway 9. The site can certainly accommodate the proposed use. It has room to identify or accommodate the 50-foot by 50-foot compound. Access can be provided to the site. It's really a matter of the location on the subject property here and addressing the numerous setback requirements of the township. The variance can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good. There's no odors, dust, heat, or glare. You heard testimony that this would be built to industry standards. It is the primary location that we're showing does provide a 1-to-1 setback to the occupied buildings on the property and the adjacent properties. And it also provides 150-foot setback to properties on the adjacent property to the south. The only real negative aspect of this is the visual impact that was shown throughout the photo simulations. And again, it's very keeping in character with the utility structures in the areas, from the communications towers, from the utility poles, light poles, and just general development within the commercial corridor of Route 9. The negative aspects of the...
Can I interrupt you just a second? You made a statement about 150-foot to the property to the south?
I'm sorry, I believe I said 150 foot proper setback to the residential zoning district, to the property line to the north, and 150 foot setback to the building on the southern property line.
Oh, okay. Okay, got you. And
Okay, sure.
It's really, it's only 90 something foot, am I correct? Even the secondary location is 90 foot to the residential property line, correct?
Yes, the primary location is identified as 50 feet to the southern property line.
Correct. But if you go to,
yes,
if you go to the secondary location, it's only, it's,
yes.
How much to the residential property line?
That was, I believe, identified in the engineer's exhibit that he testified to, and that distance, as identified on his plan exhibit, alternative location exhibit, is 115.2 feet.
Correct. Okay.
To that southern property line.
Okay.
And 104 from the rear.
That would be, it'd be to the rear.
So 104 feet from the rear?
Yeah, what was it from the rear to the I'm talking residential, not to the southern property line.
So the residential zone line runs along the eastern rear property line, correct, Brian?
Correct.
So
Correct.
The setback of the second location, the alternate location proposed was 104 feet. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
That's what I was thinking. Okay, so it's 104. And then the one,
and I think
it's 115 in the secondary location to the property line to the south, correct?
It was 115.2.
Okay. To the property line to the south. Okay. And then you're 80,
and
180 something to the northerly property line.
Correct. The engineering drawings identify a distance of 184.6 feet.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure those footages were correct. Okay.
Right. And while we're discussing the alternative tower location, the exhibit in front of you now is identified as the alternative tower location for site context map. Generally,
I'm sorry to cut you off. This is page 4 of the A29 exhibit.
That's correct. Thank you.
I'll let you go.
This is very similar to our previous site context map. However, we have moved the tower to a location similar to what is depicted on the engineering drawings to show the impact of the 150 foot in that area. It starts to encroach on the outdoor storage area. It does slightly encroach in the residential district. It slightly encroaches on the southern property line. However, again, all of those areas are contained within special buffer resource areas, wetland buffers that are most likely not going to be developed.
Okay, my other question is the compound out of the wetlands in this view?
Yes.
The exterior of the compound, there will be no additional compound expansion into the wetlands?
That is correct. The engineering drawings show a more specific site context and design in that location. These exhibits were primarily provided to show context to the area around it with the aerial photography.
Mr. Chair, if you recall from the engineering drawing, they had that retaining wall on the eastern portion, like right outside the compound in the easterly direction, which I would assume, and I would ask the applicant to confirm, that's to ensure that no disturbance into that buffer area is seen if the compound were to be moved to this location that we're looking at right now. Is that correct, Mr. Quinn?
Yes. Yes. So everything would be outside of the wetland buffer.
Well, how tall is that the retaining wall?
I will have to ask Mr. Our civil engineer, Mr. Guttrell.
Josh, can you put that back up? Do you have the ability to put that back up on the screen?
Sure. I think Brian has to let go of his screen. Maybe?
Oh, I think he did.
Let me try that again.
So just to highlight the retaining wall here,
Right. So
everything would be outside the wetlands buffer.
Right. It slopes down pretty steep here towards the wetland buffer. So we would put a retaining wall here. So just to ensure that we don't disturb that buffer there. This wall would only have to be about 3 feet high at its highest point.
Now, what type of wall will that be?
It would probably be like one of those modular block walls, like an Allen block or keystones,
Okay.
something similar to that.
Will there be a footing under it?
Yes.
It would be.
Yeah. Yeah. There'll be a footing. As long as we're at 3 feet, I don't know if Howell has a specific code, but usually if it's 3 feet or less, it's not really structural. But yeah, there'll still be a proper footing installed.
So Josh, I would just say as a condition of any approval prior to getting any construction permits, you got to, provide an engineered shop drawing for the retaining wall for building permits.
Sure.
And then I think I just want to ask the question too, if you can pull back up the architects, not the architects, the planners exhibit, the last page that he just had with all the environmental constraints. And I want to ask Mr. Guttrell this because I think it's important for the boards.
Let me stop sharing mine.
Hey, Brian, can you share that exhibit again?
Yes, I'm trying. All right. Can anybody see that?
I have a delay.
Not at the moment.
Okay.
Okay, so Mr. Guttrell, so that 150-foot radius onto the residential property to the east. So obviously we're saying that sliver there is completely encumbered by wetlands and then also a 300-foot buffer. So even hypothetically, if an owner of that property were to get permits to develop within that radius, they'd still have to get access all the way from Alexander Avenue, crossing over a special resource, 300-foot riparian buffer, for what, 600 feet of their property?
Correct. Yeah. Yes. And I don't see.
That would be very highly unlikely for a structure to be built there for residential purposes.
I agree. Yes.
Okay. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Charlie, what about to the south?
To the south, I'll let Mr. Guttrell opine to that. So I don't believe what he has shown on the plan there is the wetlands and the 50-foot buffer. So that line along the southern property line there, that's the outer limit of the 50-foot buffer. So could they get some kind of transition area averaging plan, and add buffer to the southwest corner of the wetlands on the site and then develop along the sliver of that? I'll let Mr. Guttrell opine to the practicality of that, from a permitting perspective.
Right. Like I said before, that's highly unlikely, if not impossible. What's not shown on this map is also the 100-year floodplain associated with South Creek here. So that's a further environmental block for development there. I personally don't see a way a permit for development there would be obtained. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. I just, based on my experience, I don't see that happening.
Do you have an exhibit of the floodplain there, just so the board can be clear?
I do
Reference to
not
the property
know.
line.
I can kind of show you on my site plan, on my grading plan, where about it is, if that helps.
Yeah, while you're doing that, Mr. Quinn, I'm going to interrupt just a second. Mr. Tropoli.
Chair.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to touch base. with gross and gross,
Yes,
there's
sir.
no way we're gonna get started with that tonight.
Would you like to call the applicant up? You know, Mr. Quinn, we may need to just break for a moment.
Sure, that's fine.
Mr. Scher?
Yes, I
Can
would
we
like,
stop sharing this screen then so we can
Right.
get that back?
Yes.
Thank you.
thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt this, but there's no way we're gonna get to gross and gross. We need to make sure that we can move them.
Good evening, Mr. Nancy. Salvatore Alfieri.
Hello, Mr. Alfieri. How are you, sir?
Very
Sorry,
good.
we're not gonna get to you tonight. I just wanted to go ahead and let you
Understood.
know the date here.
Eileen, what's the next date?
It's not pretty. June 14th already has 2 cases scheduled. And now we just carried the Home Sweet Home to there. June 28th has 2 items scheduled as well. After that, you're looking at July 12th, and that has something scheduled.
Are the June 28th ones lengthy applications?
Give me 1 second.
Because we're a final and I think we're addressing all of the professional reports, so I'm hoping it won't take very long.
Charlie, do you have an opinion on that with regard to the technical considerations, just briefly, without getting into the hearing?
Yeah, it's my understanding, they've submitted revised landscaping stuff to address their woodlands management. I think as long as they can work that out with Sherry and make the, contribution up front for that stuff, I don't think it should be an issue. As far as my end with stormwater management, they made some configuration changes to one of the outfalls for one of the basins, and then I had some additional requirements. All that's going to be a condition of an approval, just to verify prior stormwater management design work done by Planning Webb Hampton when this was originally a planning board case early 2000. So I would anticipate that, if they agree to a lot of those conditions, this should be hopefully pretty straightforward, as it's only a final.
If that helps, Eileen.
Well, June 28th is Ramtown Greenville Road, which has a lot of public.
Right.
The only other thing I can suggest, Sal, is you have Brookstone on the 14th. If you want me to put this before them, and you maybe can at least start Brookstone.
Yeah, that's fine, because this one's older. If I
Right.
have no problem. My client will hang, the other client will hang me, but I can take it.
Yeah, but they're not here right now, right?
Exactly.
No.
You won't.
And this is being carried, so it goes before them anyway, so,
Thanks, Eileen. I have cover now.
okay. So June 14th,
Okay, so we're going June 14th.
yes.
Okay. Anyone in the audience, public, here to hear case number BA 1519F, Gross and Gross Associates. This case will be carried to June 14th with no further notice at 7 o'clock. Expiration date is June 30th. We're okay with that, Eileen?
Yes.
Okay, June 30th, 2021 is the expiration date. Okay,
Thank you.
Mr. Alfieri.
Thank you. Good night.
Yes, sir.
Good night.
Mr. Quinn, I am sorry. We will continue.
Sure.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Quinn, not to interrupt again, but when I was going through my planning testimony, I took a pause to address a few questions from the chairman. I just have a few other minor points I'd like to put on the record as part of my testimony.
Okay.
As I was going through, I spoke to the negative aspects of the project and the primary negative aspect being the visual aspect of the communications tower, which was minimized by the siting of the tower in the commercial corridor at the southern end of the township and an area of extensive vegetation. Also, the design of the communications tower as a monopole, not to be compared to the larger transmission towers or lattice towers in the area. It's a simple, clean design. And then also needs to be shown as part of the application that the application will not substantially impair the zone plan or the zoning ordinance. And again, this is a permitted conditional use. It's compatible with the surrounding commercial uses. And review of the county master plan identifies the Route 9 corridor as primarily commercial, urban, industrial in nature. And the land use map identifies it generally as the same. And the 2019 master plan reexamination report, a few points that we pulled out from that are the encourage the redevelopment or revitalization of vacant or underused properties along the primary commercial corridors of Route 9. I bring that up, again, the location of the proposed tower being further back from the property, closer where it's only impacting those environmental areas will create an opportunity for improved redevelopment of the commercial property in the location of the existing diner. Another aspect of the reexamination report is to provide new facilities where necessary in order to accommodate population growth, economic development, and the changing needs of the residents. So this does provide a benefit to the area and justifies the components of the master plan. Weighing the positive and negative aspects of the project, I believe the granting of variances will not create a substantial detriment, will not create a substantial impact to the zone plan or zoning ordinance, and the approval is warranted.
Okay, thank you. And again, I just want to highlight one of the points you just mentioned, because I think it's pretty relevant here. And even Mr. Cantor even mentioned, I think before in his question was, the question about where to put this tower on the property. Okay, I think that's really the question I think everyone has. What's the best location? We've been trying to design this in a sense to put this where it's only impacting areas that could really are very strongly limited from any kind of development for the future. The question kept coming is, can it be moved further towards the front of the property so it's increasing the setback from the rear, or further from the rear of the southern property line where it's increasing the setback there. In terms of moving it further up in the front of the property, you mentioned before, it's one of the goals of the master plan is to encourage redevelopment and development of this commercial corridor, correct?
I'm sorry, was Mr. Quinn, was that a question posed to me?
Yes, yes. I was saying,
sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so the question about the location of this tower has been, I think, the primary concern of the board. Where its best location on the property is here. I think you mentioned a point about how I wanted to highlight it because I think the question came before. The master plan certainly is encouraging the redevelopment and development of this corridor here in town, correct?
Yes, it does.
So by putting this tower further up in the developable area, do you think that have a beneficial impact on potential future development here of this property? Or do you think it's better served for future development of this area to have this property more tucked in the back where it's impacting more in terms of the environmentally constrained areas?
I guess two aspects of that. I think the tower location further to the east, closer to the wetland buffer, is more appropriate. One, for the future development of the property for more substantial commercial development. I would assume similar to what we see currently on the southern property line. The other aspect would be the negative visual component. Right now, while the tower is tucked back in the mature trees and vegetation in that area, the trees that are back there do help screen it, at least from the lower level and from the site component. Moving that out further will make it a little bit more obvious in the immediate area.
But even with respect to the alternate location proposed as well, it's still taking advantage almost of the environmental constraints to tuck this into the back of the property, thus freeing up more area for potential redevelopment of this site.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Now, I don't think I have any more further questions for Mr. Seidel. I know, I suspect the board has a number of questions we can ask. I know we were asking some before between him and our engineer. but I know there's certainly want to have more of a discussion with you, because I think you made a number of really relevant points here as to why this location was chosen here on the property.
Jennifer?
Surprisingly, I really don't have any questions. It's important that the board make the distinction, and I know that we talked about this, Mr. Quinn, I think at the last hearing, but it's been a little bit, that you're here for D3 variance, correct? Not a D1 variance, right?
That is correct.
So the standards for D3 are more like a bulk variance. So it's not the heavy Medici case that we would see in a D1 case where you have to go through particular suitability. And I do think that Mr. Seidel did provide a lot of testimony as if it were kind of a D1 variance in terms of master plan reconciliation and positive and negative criteria. But it's important for the board to know the distinction in what their burden is under a D3 versus a straight D1. That being said, I think that the testimony was very comprehensive. I think the exhibits really did provide a significant amount of information that, I don't know was readily apparent just in looking at the site plan images from the last hearing. That being said, we do have ordinance standards for a reason. So it's up to you whether you feel that, they've provided enough information to give you a comfort level on the location of the tower. I'm not 100% sold on the fact that it moves closer to Route 9, which we have a lot of visual clutter along Route 9 as it is that negative of an impact? But I would defer to you. I mean, the environmentally sensitive areas are there. I do agree with the applicant's engineer that while I do think what Charlie brought up about some buffer averaging, I do think that is something that is not that difficult to permit. Wholesale development in that environmentally constrained area to the east and to the south is unlikely, in my opinion. So I would submit that with respect to the proofs, he provided information in a very organized way. But again, it's up to you to determine whether or not you're comfortable with the location that they're proposing.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Right now, what I want to do is just basically turn over to the board here real quick. If Mr. Siddle could pull up the two different locations with the wetlands involved, if you could share your screen with that again. I'd like to come up with the location that the board would be looking at. I do agree with the environmental areas now, once we've seen them. I do agree, but which is lesser of the two evils? If it's closer to the southern property line, okay, this is a secondary location, correct?
Yes, this is location 2.
Okay, if you look at the 150-foot radius, you're not really impeding too much in the southerly line. I don't know what the scale is of that. And it's, if you go to 1, you're going to be impeding more in the southerly line. What, 70, 80 feet, 115 feet from 50 feet? You're going to be 60 more feet.
Well, it'd be about 100 feet into the, it's 50 feet from the property line. It'd be about 100 feet into that property, the radius.
So in the first location, the primary location, the initial location, say, it was 100 feet to the, roughly 100 feet to the southern, into the southern property line.
Right. But
this one is looking about 35 feet to the southern and about
35
50
feet.
Right,
50
even
feet
if
to
you
the-
did get a wetlands average, it's more than likely you're not even going to be close to that. See that you're in further, and then also the tip of it actually touches, what I would call out of the environmentally restrained area of the southerly property. So if you go to the secondary location, you're 100% on the southerly property line in the wetlands area, correct?
Can you pull up the secondary location, Brian?
Yeah, see, you're you're 100% in the wetland area of the south property line. So, you know, I'm gonna leave that up to the board, which location you would look at, you know, if you look in favor. Can we come back to the full board now?
Okay, stop sharing.
Yes, thank you. That's the question I'm going to propose to the board, which location, if this was to go favorable, which location would you be looking at?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, Mr. Saya.
So for me, it's the four sides of the compound, the size of the compound, and where's the egress ingress to the compound. Also, you know, there's that septic that's going to be abandoned. So if you're abandoning one, I suspect you're going to have to abandon the other. So we want that as a condition of any approval here, so that, you know, any further development to the frontage of that property will be hooked up to the sewer line. So, you know, it's more than just, you know, saying which site we like better, which location.
No, wait, I'm just trying to find out where we're going to even be looking if this is going in.
Well, getting back to my point, you know, the location, the size of the footprint, and the site, you know, the ingress egress. The point is, if you need more parking and you're up there, you know, how close to the compound can you come? If you're developing the front of the property, are you going to be encroaching on, you know, the egress ingress of the compound? You know, say a restaurant comes up, right, and you need 50 parking spots. You know, the storage area gets abandoned. You know, what are we doing with that particular compound? Oh, is it how big is it? Where's the ingress, egress, ingress to it? And does it prohibit the front development of the property?
Okay.
If you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. Can you pull up the site plan?
Sure. Josh,
So
can you do
say
that
it,
for us?
just to give you a short, a quick answer to one of those questions. The compound's 50 by 50. And is it the driveway, Josh, the same location back to the compound as it in both locations?
Yeah.
It just kind of turns to the north in the one.
For the most part, yeah. And we also are proposing easements, access easements. I believe I sent a survey to Charlie, which had those easements on there. They do have to be updated because we have that jog in the drop in the protect that tree. But yeah, so the access drive will be inside of an easement to prevent further development or obstruction of that access.
And to kind of clarify that, Mr. Say, yes, they did provide it. There is meets and bounds for the lease area for the compound, and then there's also a separate meets and bounds for the access easement along the southerly property line. And I just put with any caveat, any future redevelopment of the remainder of the site, should the site accesses change locations or whatever, you know, at time of that site plan application, we'd make sure that the applicant would have to expand that access easement to correspond with the new driveway location, should it be shifted at some point. But, you know, that
Josh,
can come up at future site plan for the remainder of the site.
Can we accommodate that, Josh?
I'm sorry?
Can we accommodate that to relocate if future development of the property requires moving the driveway to be conducive to work with the other development? We can relocate that section of the front driveway here.
Absolutely.
For access.
Can we take another look at it real quick?
Sure. Can you just pull up the site plan?
I will.
Thank you.
So
You have the second location?
Second location, yes.
There we
So
go.
it's primarily the same driveway access off the back, except once it gets to the trees, I think you testified that it cuts in more.
Right,
So it's
makes
still
sense.
preserving that area using that area to the south to preserve the rest of the area I guess, to the northern part of most of the property, and then it would just be occupying that.
Yeah, Josh, show the FWH exhibit. I think that clarifies it for Mr. Saya.
Which exhibit?
That's the as-built plan FWH. It has the meets and bounds.
That's exhibit 828, but I think that was.
I don't have that one, so I would have to have.
Eileen, I'll share it. I have it if you
All
want.
right, thank you, Charlie.
I would also just defer to Shari on like the trees, because I think that the initial location, which is I think what you're showing right here, would necessitate fewer trees being removed. Just,
Sure,
I mean,
and we were
if
gonna
you're
flag
weighing
that
all
as a
the
comment.
factors.
Yeah, so Mr. Say, just to clarify, this is an access easement along the southerly property line to the driveway servicing the compound, and then there's a separate note here for a proposed lease area to enclose the compound. Should this front portion of the site in the future come in for a site plan, to reconfigure the driveway access or something like that, we'd require as a condition of that approval that, this access easement be reconfigured, to jive with the new driveway location, should it change in the future.
Okay.
That answer your question, Mr. Sayer?
Yeah.
And then should you guys decide you prefer that alternative option, obviously this would have to be amended to go all the way to the new compound location.
Okay.
What about the other members, Mr. Chairman? Let's ask them.
Yeah. Mr. Mertens.
I prefer location number one because it is like what Jennifer was just saying. I would prefer not to disturb any woodlands as opposed to, clear cutting more to make, put it in an area which I don't think it's gonna, and the bottom line is it's still gonna fall in the sensitive wetlands, and I think one's better in my eyes.
Okay. Mr. Cantor.
No comment, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hughes?
Yeah, I'm just kind of like in my head, fighting with myself. Do you want to disturb one property quite a bit or two properties a little bit each? I'm actually leaning towards Mr. Martin's. I'm almost thinking that is a better situation, given that all of the falls are going to fall in an area that's wetlands. Now, I know from the business that I'm in, people building houses, wetland studies can change things and development can start to happen. And potentially, I know this is a different situation. So I think I'm leaning towards what Mr. Martin said. I think the first plan.
Mr. Gonzalez.
I can go with the first one.
And I kind of have to agree to a certain extent as far as clearing the trees, moving it up into the trees. Okay, now that we got that straight, is Mr. Quinn, do you have any further witnesses?
No, that's the extent of our direct testimony.
Charlie, you have any further?
Nothing further, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we're pushing 10 o'clock. I'm gonna go ahead and open to public, and let's see if we can wrap this up.
Chairman, a motion open to public.
Motion by Mr. Saya. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Hughes. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, Eileen, at this time, we'll take questions and comments from the public.
At this time, the chairman has opened the hearing up for members of the public for any questions or comments on the application for Diamond Communications. If you have any questions or comments, please use the raise your hand feature. If you're on the phone, you need to press *9 to enter or to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself.
Got any public out there?
There's 3 members of the public, but I really don't believe that they are raising their hands, so.
Let's make one more call.
Last call for any questions or comments on the application for Diamond Communications. Please use the raise your hand feature.
Eileen, what do they do if they're a phone call listener?
Phone call listener does *9 to raise their hand, *6 to unmute themselves. You want to call in, Charlie?
No, the attendee says there's one phone call listener, so I just thought I'd.
There is, but I'm pretty sure that is the court reporter.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay, Eileen, last call. I'm gonna ask for a motion to close public.
Motion to close.
Motion by Mr.
Mertens.
Mr. Merton. Do I have a second? Do I have a second?
Say a second.
Mr. Say a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, Mr. Quinn.
Great, thank you. So I think hope we answered all of your questions tonight. I know that I don't know if there's any other questions the board may have for us. I know Mr. Saya had some questions, I guess, had asked just a few minutes ago. I don't know if we have answered all of your questions or concerns here, or if there's anything else you'd like to understand from us better.
Mr. Saya?
No, I'm good. I think, listening to my fellow board members, listening to the professionals, option 1 seems to be the most viable, less impervious, on the run in, run out on the easement, the extension of the easement, I should say. And of course, we're not, hitting down as much canopy at the same time. So, that's a benefit. Understand the public benefit of what you're trying to do and understand the previous testimony that was put on the record, coming off of the transmission lines, etc. So it all sits well at this point in time. Over.
Okay, so I know we only have 5 board members that can vote. I don't know if, I certainly don't want to, if everyone is happy, if everyone felt similar, we certainly, if I could poll the board. However, if anyone is concerned or anything else, we certainly don't want to, we can come back. I just don't necessarily want to waste the board's time if that's the case. I know you have quite a bit of other matters on your agenda right now.
Mr. Tropoli, I'll let you.
Well, we really don't poll the board, Chris.
Okay.
I tend to frown on that, although looking at the various faces here, it seems to me that you have a consensus on number 1. I don't see anyone shaking their heads. I've taken down a substantial amount of conditions of potential approval, which of course I would share with you. And it almost sounded to me as if Mr. Saya was you have 5 members. As you're the advocate, and if you feel you've proved your case, I think the board has asked you a sufficient amount of questions to put it to a vote. And I think the chairman is leaning towards the direction of calling for a vote. Unless there's any substantial objection, and I'll ask the board if there's any substantial objection from proceeding forward tonight.
Mr. Tropoli, I'm sorry. I raised the concern before, and I don't know if it's appropriate to raise that concern, but I'm concerned that that building is sitting there abandoned with no plans to do anything about it.
Okay, that would be a question for, listen, let's get it out, because if this is, there's only 5 votes available.
If it's appropriate, tell me, but, and I'll back off, but I feel,
I don't know whether or not this applicant is able to answer that question, but I'll defer to Chris. Do you know anything regarding that abandoned diner? I know Mr. Cantor has raised it in the past as an issue.
I mean, we can go back and double check, but quite frankly, I don't think we have any set plans at this point from our property owner to, or a time frame in which he can find a new tenant at this point. I know there's no new tenant there occupying it right now. I know he's working towards trying to develop the property or to find a new tenant to occupy that diner. Again, this marketplace is one that's been very challenging, especially given the recent concerns. And again, that's one of the reasons and why we've been kind of working to design this in a way that would ultimately have the right development here in the future that would accommodate that.
And Mr. Cantor, I'd like to add to that just from my perspective. Mr. Saya brought out a very good point with regard to the septic fields. If somebody wanted to, let's say, redevelop that diner in the present condition, you know, to rebuild it, and the septic fields were gone, you know, or if they remained, they would be able to probably use those fields if they were approved. So by eliminating two of those septic fields, in my opinion, you're limiting the development or the redevelopment of that diner. So you're already on the pathway of renovating the property. I'm not trying to plead Chris's case, but do you agree with me on that?
Agreed on that one, yeah.
Okay, and Chris, do you have anything to offer on that? The elimination of the septic fields would, and most likely would promote future development along the lines of what the master plan had in mind for this particular part of Howell Township.
Sure, and I agree with you. And I think the fact that if you lose the septic, it certainly says that you're going to have a development that will be tying into the sewer. It certainly would be more conducive to having that type of project here. And I think it's going to be able to accommodate a much more appropriate type of development here that's going to, you know, I think that the township would really want here for the long term, for the long haul.
And moving the tower to alternate position number 2 could potentially limit the development of that and essentially be somewhat contrary to the master plan by way of limiting the kind of development that would be in that area. Is that also correct?
Yes, and in fact, that's what I think our planner was trying to get to before, and I was trying to make is that you typically want these types of facilities, you know, tucked in the appropriate location. Certainly, while taking into account all the required setbacks, literally the concern that you made before to me is one almost to advocate for this location and this particular variance here, because by putting it in this location, you're making this site much more conducive to further development and for it to be redeveloped. I think if you put a tower right in the middle of the property and you're only able to use the front quarter or third of the property now, it's certainly not as attractive for development than if you have this, you know, the 80% of the property available for redevelopment.
Thank you, Mr. Cantor. Does that satisfy you to some extent?
It does, Mr. Tropoli. Thank you.
I could also add, and perhaps, you know, it's important to distinguish the fact that this is not the property owner. They're going to be a leaseholder on the property. However, obviously they have some kind of relationship with the owner. So I would just request, Mr. Quinn, that when you do communicate with the owner, can you pass on the concerns of the board with respect to, you know, the fact that the town would really appreciate efforts on his part to, you know, adaptively reuse or redevelop the property.
Sure, certainly. And what I would also submit to the board is that I think when you have, when you have a tenant here on the property, when it is being used, it certainly lends itself to be able to be developed quicker. You know, it's one where once there's no tenants on a property, it's really hard to find that anchor tenant to come back. But once you actually have the ability to, and revenue coming in, you're able to maintain the property better and make it much more attractive to marketable.
Understood.
Okay, well, Mr. Quinn, I'll leave it to you. I mean, obviously, I think you've summed up your case fairly well, and unless you want to make any final comments, I think the board is most likely ready to move forward, Mr. Chair, on this matter.
I think so.
Quinn?
Sure.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the board? Mr. Saya, you're muted. You're muted. There you go. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to approve this D3 variance based on all the testimony that has been taken into account. And the fact that Mr. Tropoli has done such a good job of documenting all of that testimony. And of course, our professionals who have added tremendous benefit to our understanding the path forward to this application. So with that, my motion is to approve, sir.
Thank you. Got a motion. Do I have a second?
Mr. Chair, I would just like to also echo Mr. Saya's comments about our professionals. I think this is one of those cases where they really shine to me, and the guidance and Mr. Tropoli and Mr. Cunliffe, Ms. Beam. I would like to second the motion.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call, Eileen?
Yes, you may. Mr. Cantor,
Yes, on just the recognition that Mr. Quinn will mention my concerns to the property owner, but yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
I'm going to vote yes, and I do appreciate the fact that Mr. Cantor is concerned about the building the way it is now. And I do feel this is going to be a better asset for the property owner to sell it. And I'm going to, again, vote yes.
thank you. Mr. Saya
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
Okay, yes. I forgot about Mr. Gonzalez. My vote is yes, based on all testimony. I do agree that this is a benefit, but also the proofs to put this cell tower here being the similar to a bulk variance, the burdens of proof aren't as great. And I do really feel that the applicant has met their burdens of proof based, actually over met their burdens of proof. I really thank them for taking a break from the initial first meeting that we had and meeting with our professionals. I think our professionals did a jam up job and just really got into this. And, I really appreciate all their testimony and their advice to us. And, because I really, at the beginning, put it where it's, compliant. And then, after the testimony, Brian really brought good testimony, showing the wetlands, showing, the environmental constraints. And yeah, I agree. I don't think any of the southerly or the easterly portion of the property would, the surrounding properties will ever be built due to the environmental constraints. So yeah, I think this is a good application, and I appreciate all the work that all the professionals, both applicant and our professionals, did to prepare to have it brought before this board. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your time. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, I know we're a little overtime here, but I appreciate you guys, we're sticking it out to get through this. So, okay, is there any further business of the board?
No, sir.
Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn? And you guys will see you at next meeting. When is our next meeting?
June 14th.
June 14th. Okay.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Got a motion? Do I have a second?
I'll second that, sir.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, guys, y'all have a good rest of your week, and we'll see you next meeting. Thank y'all very much.
Happy Memorial Day.
And be safe.
Bye.
Enjoy the long weekend.
Yes,
Thank
you
you
guys
too.
be good.